There's a quiet rhythm to every poker table, the click of chips, the soft shuffle of cards, the small talk that fades once the blinds hit the felt. And beneath it all, there's the part of the game that most beginners rush past, the part that decides almost everything before a single card hits the flop, what you choose to play and what you choose to fold. Before we get into it, if you enjoy learning the quiet side of the game, take a second to subscribe or leave a comment. It helps more players find their way to this table. Now, let's slow the pace. You're sitting in your seat. The dealer pushes the deck forward. The blinds are out, and for a moment everything is still. This is the moment most players underestimate. Because right here, before you've even seen the flop, the most important decision of the hand has already arrived. Understanding starting hands isn't just about memorizing which cards are good or bad. It's about building the foundation for every decision that follows. When you play the right hands, you control the flow of the hand, the pot size, and your emotional balance. When you play the wrong ones, you're reacting instead of leading, and that's where most beginners lose themselves. Poker looks fast from the outside, big pots, quick bets, flashes of luck. But beneath the surface, it's a game of patience and discipline. Every professional you've ever watched has one quiet advantage over casual players. They fold more. They start fewer battles, but they start better ones. Most new players see folding as missing out. They sit down wanting to play, not wait. So they stretch. They convince themselves that 10-8 suited looks playable, or that any ace deserves a look. But here's the truth. The cards you fold are what protect you. Folding is not weakness. It's how you conserve energy, time, and focus for the moments that actually matter. The art of starting hands is really about self-control. It's about understanding that poker isn't a game of constant action. It's a game of selective participation. You're not being paid to see every flop. You're being paid, in a sense, to wait for the right ones. That's what separates a calm, consistent player from a restless one. The calm player watches the table and lets poor hands go without hesitation. They understand that folding 10 hands in a row isn't boredom, it's preparation. Because when they finally enter a pot, they do so with purpose. The restless player, on the other hand, wants to do something. They can't sit still. Or they play because they're impatient or because they just lost a hand and want to win it back. They chase the feeling of involvement, and in doing so they step into the same trap that catches most beginners. Mistaking activity for progress. The goal of this session is to change how you think about starting hands. To move from a mindset of I want to play to one of I want to choose well. Because every great player knows your win rate, your confidence, even your emotional stability at the table, all of it starts with what you decide to play before the flop. Over the next few chapters, we'll walk through the logic behind starting hands, the simple structure that underlies good decisions, and the reasoning that turns guesswork into strategy. We'll talk about position, combinations, and context, but in plain human terms. No charts, no complex math, just rhythm, reasoning, and awareness. Think of this less as a lesson and more as a recalibration. You're not here to memorize. You're here to understand. You're here to learn why certain hands have power and why others don't. Why some hands give you room to maneuver, while others box you into corners. Because once you understand that, you stop fighting the game and start flowing with it. And the beauty of this topic, starting hands, is that it's simple but never shallow. The deeper you look into it, the more it reveals. Every decision you make at the poker table connects back to this one skill. Choosing the right moments to engage. That's what defines a thoughtful player. The one who doesn't chase every hand, but makes every hand they play mean something. So settle in. The chips are stacked, the cards are waiting, and all we're going to do is slow the game down. Because when you truly understand what to play and what to fold, you stop gambling and start playing poker. Every poker hand begins with 2 cards. That seems simple enough. But the difference between a beginner and a strong player is not how they play those 2 cards. It's how they think about them. Most beginners look at their hand in isolation. They see King-Queen suited and think, that's strong. They see 7-2 offsuit and think, that's garbage. And they're not wrong. But they're also missing the deeper truth. Every hand gains or loses value depending on position, stack depth, and the players yet to act. The foundational principle of starting hands is selective participation guided by context. That means you don't simply play good cards, you play good situations. Let's start with something simple. Imagine two players. One sits on the button, one under the gun. Both are dealt the same hand, ace-jack offsuit. The player on the button can see every action before them. They know who has entered the pot, who's folded, who's likely strong or weak. The player under the gun, on the other hand, acts first. They are playing blind to what the rest of the table will do. So even though the cards are identical, the situation is entirely different. The first player might raise confidently, the second might fold, and both could be right. That's the first shift beginners must make, learning that strength is relative, not absolute. Your hand's value depends less on what it is, and more on where you are, who's behind you, and what's already happened. The second shift is an understanding that folding is an active choice, not a passive one. Every fold is a decision that says, this hand won't serve me here. That's not giving up, it's maintaining structure. Strong players fold far more hands than they play because they know something most beginners don't. The money you don't lose matters just as much as the money you win. Here's the common beginner mistake: playing too many hands. It feels harmless at first, you're here to play after all. You've a call with hands like Jack-9, 10-8 suited, small pairs out of position, thinking, maybe I'll hit something. Sometimes you do, and that's what makes it dangerous. You catch a lucky flop once and suddenly you believe it's possible every time. That's how loose play becomes a habit, and how variance disguises bad decision-making as skill. But poker punishes impatience slowly. You won't lose everything in one hand. Instead, you'll leak small amounts of chips, one marginal decision at a time, and over hundreds of hands. That's what separates winners from everyone else. The discipline to fold hands that could win, because you understand they usually won't. The foundational logic of starting hands rests on three pillars: position, connectivity, and domination potential. Position is about information. The later you act in a hand, the more data you have on what everyone else is doing. That information is power. It lets you play more hands profitably because you can adjust based on what you've seen. Early position is the opposite. You're in the dark, so your hand selection must tighten to protect you from that disadvantage. That's why professional players fold hands like ace-10 or king-queen from early seats, even though they look strong. They know they'll be acting first for the rest of the hand, and that lack of information costs money over time. Connectivity refers to how your cards work together. Hands like 8-7 suited can build straights and flushes, giving them multiple ways to win. Hands like king-4 offsuit rarely connect to anything meaningful. They make one pair and get outkicked. Beginners often overvalue the presence of a high card, but one high card doesn't make a hand playable. It's the relationship between your two cards that gives them flexibility. And then there's domination potential. Some hands win big pots when they're ahead and lose small ones when they're behind. Others do the opposite. Ace-king, for example, can dominate many worse aces or kings. But ace-9 offsuit, that's a trap. When you hit your ace, you're often up against a better one. You win small when you're ahead and lose large when you're not. The difference between those two scenarios is the line between controlled play and chaos. This is why learning starting hands is about mindset, not memorization. Charts and hand rankings can be helpful for beginners, but they're training wheels. The goal isn't to remember what to do in every spot, it's to understand why. Once you understand why, you can adapt to new tables, new opponents, and new formats without fear. Let's look at two quick examples. Example 1, the temptation hand. You're in middle position with Queen-Jack offsuit. No one has entered the pot yet. You raise, the player on your left re-raises, and two more players call. What now? Beginners often think, I've already invested, I'll see the flop. But this hand plays poorly against that strength. It gets dominated by ace-queen, king-queen, ace-jack, king-jack. You're drawing thin, and even when you hit, you're rarely comfortable. The disciplined fold here saves you money long-term. Example 2. The overlooked gem. You're on the button with 8-7 suited. Everyone folds to you. The blinds are tight players who don't defend often. You raise and both fold. You win the blinds uncontested. Not dramatic, but profitable. You use this position and fold equity, not raw card power. That's the beauty of good hand selection. It's not about luck. It's about choosing spots that give you control. The foundational takeaway is simple but profound. Don't play hands because you're bored, play hands because they make sense. When you act from logic instead of emotion, you build a structure that protects your bankroll, steadies your mood, and strengthens your future decisions. Because poker, at its core, is a long game. Every single hand you play or fold contributes to an invisible pattern that defines your results over time. The players who last aren't the ones who win every pot. They're the ones who know when not to enter one. Learning which starting hands to play isn't glamorous. It's quiet, repetitive, even dull at times. But that's exactly what makes it powerful. It's the foundation that turns noise into clarity. And once you build that discipline, once you learn to fold more and play with purpose, you'll notice something unexpected. The game slows down. You start seeing patterns. You stop chasing and start waiting. And waiting in poker is where the real money is made. Once you've chosen your starting hands wisely, the next question is, what happens after the cards fall? Because pre-flop discipline doesn't end when you raise or fold. It carries forward into every decision, on the flop, the turn, and the river. The strength of your opening range shapes the story you'll tell for the rest of the hand. Think of poker as 4 quiet chapters. Each one tests whether the decisions you made early can hold up under pressure. And the better your starting hands are, the clearer those later chapters become. Pre-flop. The pre-flop stage is where everything begins. When you look down and see your 2 cards, the goal isn't just to decide whether they're good. It's to imagine how they'll play across all future streets. Ask yourself simple questions. Can this hand flop top pair with a strong kicker? Can it make straights or flushes? If I miss the flop, does it still have potential to continue? Strong starting hands, like big pairs, suited broadways, or connected cards in position, give you options. Weak ones trap you. They make one pair and leave you guessing. Let's say you raise from the cutoff with ace-king suited. That decision alone gives you range advantage. You can represent strength on many boards because your pre-flop range contains the best hands. If the flop comes king high, you're likely ahead. If it misses completely, you still have backdoor draws and fold equity. That's the benefit of disciplined hand selection before the flop. It creates comfort after it. Now contrast that with ace-7 offsuit from early position. Same ace, same excitement, but the problems multiply. When you hit an ace, you're often out-kicked. When you miss, you have no backup plan. You're building a pot where most of the time you'll be uncertain. That's what we try to avoid. Uncertainty created by impatience. Good starting hands simplify later decisions. Bad ones complicate them. The flop. The flop is the moment of truth. The first time your theoretical plan meets reality. You see 3 community cards and must instantly reinterpret your hand's value. Here's the mindset shift. You're no longer just evaluating your 2 cards. You're evaluating how they interact with the flop and your opponent's likely range. If you entered the hand with strong cards, many flops will favour you. If you entered with weak ones, you'll find yourself floating through uncertainty, hoping the board rescues you. Take pocket queens as an example. You raise pre-flop, the big blind calls. Flop comes 10-6-2 rainbow. That's a dream spot. Your range advantage holds and your hand is comfortably ahead of most holdings. But if the flop comes ace-king-9, suddenly your queens shrink. You didn't do anything wrong, it's just that your hand connects poorly with that texture. Strong players don't panic, they recognise when their relative strength shifts. They slow down, control pot size, and reevaluate. Meanwhile, the player who started with a random ace, who shouldn't have entered the pot to begin with, now feels emboldened by that ace on the board. They win a small pot, but only because they played a bad hand and happened to get lucky once. Over time, those lucky pots vanish into the long curve of mathematics. Discipline still wins. The flop teaches us this. Your pre-flop decisions are not separate from post-flop play. They are the reason you either face easy choices or difficult ones. The turn. By the turn, the pot has grown and so has the tension. This is where beginners often lose control. They've invested chips and feel obligated to keep going. But poker doesn't reward commitment. It rewards clarity. When you start with solid hands, the turn allows for calm evaluation. Your decision-making becomes ratio-based, not emotional. Ask, has the turn changed anything? Did it complete a straight or a flush? Does it help my range or the opponent's? Can I represent strength credibly based on how I played earlier? Imagine continuing the hand with ace-king suited. You raised pre-flop, got 1 caller. Flop, king 9-5. You bet, they call. Turn 2 of hearts. This card changes almost nothing. Your top pair remains best most of the time. You can bet again confidently, extracting value. That comfort comes from your hand's foundation. Strong starting cards create stability as the board unfolds. Now picture holding King 9 offsuit instead. You flop top 2 pair on King 9-5 and the turn brings an ace. Suddenly the situation flips. Your strong-looking hand now faces potential domination from Ace-King or Ace-9. A hand that felt invincible becomes fragile. That's the curse of playing hands that create marginal situations. They oscillate wildly in strength from one street to the next. Emotional players chase that roller coaster. Disciplined ones avoid it entirely. The river. By the time the river comes, the pot is large and the mistakes are magnified. Good players arrive here with hands that make sense. Their line, the sequence of actions they've taken, tells a coherent story, and that story began pre-flop. A clear, consistent range allows you to represent value hands believably, or to bluff selectively when the board favours your side of the narrative. Let's continue our earlier example. You held Ace-King suited. Flop, King 9-5, turn 2 of hearts, river 10 of clubs. You've bet each street and been called. On this river, the board doesn't threaten your top pair much. You check, your opponent checks back, and you take the pot. It's not dramatic, but it's controlled, consistent, and profitable. Now imagine if you'd started with King 7 suited instead. You'd have the same top pair on the flop, but every later street would feel dangerous. Each bet would come with a question. Is my kicker good enough? And by the river, that uncertainty often costs chips, through unnecessary calls, thin value bets, or emotional bluffs. Bad starting hands create difficult rivers. Good ones allow you to glide through them with clarity. Full hand walkthrough. Let's slow down and trace one complete hand from start to finish. How good a starting hand discipline guides every choice. You're in the cut-off seat with ace, queen suited. Stacks are deep, blinds are moderate. Everyone folds to you, you raise 3 times the big blind. The button calls, blinds fold. Pre-flop, you've opened a strong playable hand in position. You're comfortable facing a call, flop. Queen 10-4 rainbow, you have top pair with top kicker. This is a near-ideal board, few immediate threats. You make a small continuation bet to extract value and protect against draws. The button calls. Turn 8 of clubs. This card adds straight possibilities. You slow the pace, checking to control the pot. Your opponent checks back. River, 4 of hearts. The board pairs, reducing the odds of straights improving. You bet for value, something like half the pot. The button calls and shows Queen 9. Your kicker wins. Let's examine what made this hand smooth from start to finish. You entered the pot with a hand that plays well across all streets. You used position to define the pace. Your decisions were clear, bet when ahead, control when uncertain. Value bet on safe runouts. Now imagine the same sequence starting with Queen 9 offsuit. Same flop, same call, same turn, but now you're dominated. You'd lose more, feel more doubt, and question your own reasoning. That's not bad luck. That's a weak foundation revealing itself. The difference between calm and chaos at the poker table is almost always traceable to pre-flop selection. Strong starting hands simplify every street. Weak ones create confusion and emotional turbulence. Calm players know this. They're not psychic, they're prepared. They play hands that give them room to think, room to breathe. When the board turns volatile, they already know where they stand. They can fold without frustration or bet without fear. The impatient player, meanwhile, constantly ends up in awkward spots. Weak top pairs, dominated kickers, out-of-position bluffs. They blame bad luck, not realizing that every difficult decision was born long before the flop. Poker rewards foresight, not heroics. And foresight begins with the quiet discipline to choose wisely before the first chip enters the pot. When you start each hand with that awareness, when you see your 2 cards not as a ticket to action, but as a potential path, you stop reacting and start directing. Every street becomes a continuation of your earlier clarity. That's the essence of street-by-street play. The game doesn't get harder as it goes on, and it just reveals how honest your first decision was. Every poker decision carries a quiet math beneath it, not the kind that requires formulas or calculators, just rhythm, ratios, and long-term patterns that keep your game balanced. When you understand that rhythm, you stop chasing luck and start managing probability. Most beginners think of poker hands as binary. You either win or you lose. But experienced players think in terms of ranges, the set of possible hands both you and your opponents could have based on how the action unfolds. When you choose your starting hands carefully, you're actually shaping your range before the cards even hit the board. Let's strip the concept down to its essence. A range is simply a collection of all the hands you could logically hold given your previous actions. If you raise under the gun, your range should be tight, mostly premium and strong playable hands. If you raise from the button, your range can be wider, hands with more variety, suited connectors, even a few light bluffs. This isn't guesswork, it's structure. By controlling your pre-flop selection, you create a consistent story that carries mathematical weight across hundreds of hands. Think of it like tuning an instrument. Each decision you make adds or removes a note. A disciplined player's range sounds harmonious. It fits the rhythm of position and situation. A careless player's range is noise. It can't hold shape under pressure. Now, let's connect this to mathematical balance. Every action in poker, bet, check, raise or fold, has a frequency attached to it. Even without doing complex calculations, you can grasp balance by thinking in terms of ratios. For example, imagine that you open from middle position with 20 possible hands, pairs, suited broadways and strong aces. If you occasionally add one or two weaker suited connectors as semi-bluffs, that's fine. They act as a small percentage of creative play within an otherwise solid range. The problem comes when those bluffs multiply, when half your range is speculative. Suddenly your frequencies skew. You're too loose. You'll connect with the board less often and bleed chips defending marginal spots. Good players intuitively balance this. They play a mix of strong, medium, and speculative hands in proportions that make sense. Not to deceive their opponents in every pot, but to protect themselves from being predictable. Because here's the paradox. Discipline doesn't mean rigidity. If you only play premium hands, observant opponents will notice. They'll fold when you raise and pressure you when you check. Balance is what keeps you safe. It means your strong hands are surrounded by enough variety that your overall strategy can't be easily exploited. You don't need precise percentages to understand this. Just remember 3 ratios. Strong hands, the foundation, the ones you'll bet for value most often. Playable hands, the flexible middle, suited connectors, small pairs or broadways that can hit boards in multiple ways. Selective bluffs or speculative hands, the spice. Use sparingly to prevent your range from becoming too obvious. If your hand selection is roughly 60% foundation, 30% flexible, 10% creative, you're already far ahead of most players at your level. Pot odds and implied odds, in plain terms. When we talk about balance, we can't ignore the math of opportunity, what poker calls pot odds and implied odds. Pot odds tell you whether a call is mathematically justified. Let's say there's $100 in the pot and your opponent bets $50. That means you must call $50 to win a total of $150. Your immediate reward to risk ratio is 3 to 1. You're getting $3 of potential return for every dollar you risk. To justify that call, your chance of winning should be at least 1 in 4 or 25%. That's the basic heartbeat of pot odds. You don't need to calculate that every time. With practice, you'll feel it intuitively. You'll sense when you're priced in and when you're not. And this sense directly connects to your starting hands, because better starting hands naturally produce more winning situations that fit favourable odds. Implied odds go one step further. They ask, if I hit my hand, how much more can I win? Speculative hands, like small pairs or suited connectors, rely on implied odds. You might not have the right pot odds to call right now, but if you hit your set or flush, the potential reward justifies the risk. This is why playing those hands in position is so powerful. When you control the action, you can maximize future winnings while minimizing losses when you miss. Without understanding these simple ratios, many players misjudge risk. They call too often with weak hands when the numbers don't justify it, or fold strong hands when the math clearly favors staying in. Learning to think in terms of odds, even roughly, adds a layer of objectivity that emotion can't distort. Protecting against exploitation. Balance isn't just about personal discipline, it's about survival. If you only ever raise with aces and kings, anyone paying attention will adjust. They'll fold every time you enter a pot and your winnings will shrink. If you bluff too much, they'll call you down relentlessly. True stability lives between those extremes. Let's look at an example. You're on the button. You raise with ace-king, ace-queen, pocket tens, and occasionally 9-8 suited. The small blind 3 bets. Sometimes you fold the weakest part of that range, sometimes you defend. Your opponent can't easily tell which hands you hold because your range includes both premiums and playable bluffs. That ambiguity is power. It forces your opponent into mistakes, not because you're unpredictable, but because your strategy is consistently balanced. This is why strong starting hand selection matters so much to the bigger picture. When you enter pots only with hands that make sense for your position and plan, your entire range becomes coherent. Your opponents can't isolate your weaknesses because you don't give them any. Every action you take fits within a mathematically defensible framework. Structure builds confidence. Here's the real gift of understanding range and balance. It brings peace to your game. You stop wondering if every move is right or wrong. You know that over time your structure will carry you through variance. One session might go badly, another brilliantly, but the foundation stays unshaken. When your ranges are balanced, you don't fear being called or raised. You've built in enough strength and variety that you can respond rationally. That steadiness changes how you feel at the table. You stop chasing, you stop hoping, you start knowing. Poker becomes less about surviving each hand and more about letting probability unfold in your favour. The truth is, the math of poker isn't cold, it's comforting. It's the part of the game that never lies. If you respect it, it will protect you from tilt, from ego, from the endless swing of short-term results. Good starting hands give you logical structure. Balanced ranges give you long-term protection. And together, they form the quiet backbone of every professional player's success. When you think in terms of ranges, ratios, and rhythm, the game slows down. Decisions feel less like guesses and more like steps along a well-lit path. And that ultimately is the real mathematics of poker. Not numbers on paper, but the calm confidence of knowing your play makes sense. Cash games teach structure. Tournaments test it. When you sit down at a tournament table, the cards are the same, but the clock changes everything. The blinds rise, the stacks shrink, and the meaning of your starting hand shifts with every orbit. In a cash game, you can reload and wait for the right spot. In a tournament, time itself becomes an opponent. That's why understanding starting hands in tournament poker isn't just about hand strength, it's about context, pressure, and adaptation. Early stage depth and patience. In the beginning, when stacks are deep and blinds are small, patience is your greatest weapon. Many beginners make the mistake of thinking they need to build a stack early. They start firing with any hand that looks decent, ace-9, king-jack, pocket-4, hoping to catch something big. But with deep stacks, the advantage goes to players who wait. When you have 100 or more big blinds, speculative hands like suited connectors or small pairs have genuine value. They can win massive pots if they hit, and you have the chip depth to chase those draws profitably. However, the real key in early stages is avoiding marginal top pairs, hands like ace-10 or king-queen out of position. Those look pretty before the flop but often get you in trouble after it. At this stage, think of your starting hands like investments. You're building a foundation, and not gambling for quick gains. The players who treat the early levels as warm-ups, the ones who quietly observe, fold, and gather information, are the ones still there 6 hours later. Your mindset should be simple. Play tight. Play strong. Don't force situations when the blinds are still small enough that patience costs you nothing. Middle stage, pressure and position. As the blinds climb, every orbit costs more. Now survival depends on balancing patience with selective aggression. If you cling too tightly to early stage caution, you'll slowly bleed chips. If you loosen too much, you'll burn through your stack without control. This is where starting hand discipline truly proves its worth. Because when your stack drops below 40 big blinds, you lose flexibility. You can't float flops or call raises lightly, you must be deliberate. Your playable range widens in late position and narrows in early position. On the button or cutoff, you can steal blinds with hands like king-10 suited, ace-8, or 7-6 suited, hands that have post-flop potential if called. But under the gun or early, your range should remain solid. Pairs, ace-queen plus king, queen suited. What matters most here is fold equity, the power to make others fold pre-flop and protect your chips. A strong starting hand isn't always the one that wins at showdown, it's the one that gives you the option to win before the showdown ever happens. Pay attention to stack sizes. If players behind you are short-stacked, be careful stealing too often. They're more likely to shove all in. If you have them covered, you can apply pressure instead. Tournament poker is war through exhaustion. It rewards those who make fewer emotional decisions, and that begins with choosing hands that preserve structure rather than gamble on hope. Late stage, short stacks and clarity. When the blinds get big and stacks thin out, every hand becomes a decision about survival. This is where the math of tournaments meets the psychology of fear. Short stacks can't afford to wait endlessly. You'll often have to commit with marginal hands simply because your fold equity, your ability to scare others out of the pot, is your final weapon. Here, the value of starting hands changes dramatically. Ace-5 suited might now be a push, while pocket fours might be a fold. It's not about the cards alone, it's about position, effective stack, and timing. You'll hear players talk about push-fold ranges. That's shorthand for when stacks fall below about 15 big blinds. At that point, you're no longer playing small pots or tricky post-flop lines. You're choosing which hands to go all in with and which to throw away. The key principle, choose hands that can win clean or with equity. That means hands with high card strength or suited connectors that have multiple ways to improve. You want fold equity if they fold, and real equity if they call. Hands like Ace-10 suited, King-Queen, pocket pairs, and even suited connectors down to 6-5 can become shove candidates depending on your position and remaining stack. But never forget, the later your position, the more hands become viable. Acting last is still the most powerful weapon in poker. The ICM factor. As the tournament nears the bubble, the point where prize money begins, strategy takes another turn. This is where ICM, or independent chip model, enters. It's a way of thinking about chip value relative to payouts. Not every chip is worth the same amount of money anymore. A big stack can risk more. A medium stack must protect what it has. That means folding strong but risky hands near the bubble can be the correct decision. Pocket tens might look powerful, but if losing would bust you before the money, folding could be more profitable than flipping for your tournament life. Beginners struggle here because emotion whispers louder than logic. They want to win every pot, not realizing that survival itself is a form of winning. The best tournament players know when to let go of ego and think in terms of equity preservation. That discipline, knowing when not to risk everything, is born from the same foundation as good starting hand selection. You're protecting structure, not chasing chaos. The final tables, controlled aggression. At the final stages, the blinds are huge, and every hand carries weight. This is the phase of precision aggression, when every decision swings between courage and catastrophe. The players who reach this point almost always share one thing. They manage their ranges with discipline from the very first hand. They didn't waste chips on weak openings or emotional calls. Now when the table shrinks and pressure intensifies, that discipline gives them strength. With short stacks circling and pay jumps looming, controlled aggression becomes vital. You can widen your range in position, raising often, stealing blinds, applying pressure, but never losing the calm rhythm that got you here. Play hands that allow you to move all in comfortably or fold cleanly. Nothing in between. At this point, experience and awareness replace strict theory. You're reading stack sizes, noticing who's desperate, who's protecting, who's afraid. Your starting hand discipline merges with human understanding. And that's what separates champions from survivors. The thread that connects it all. From the first hand of the tournament to the last, one truth remains. Your choices before the flop define the shape of your entire event. In the early stages, good starting hands protect your patience. In the middle, they preserve your structure. In the late game, they define your survival. When you learn to choose carefully, fold gracefully, and act decisively, you align with the rhythm of tournament poker, where time and pressure reward those who stay centered. Because in tournaments, discipline is aggression. Every fold is a weapon, every raise a message, and every starting hand you choose is a line in the quiet story of endurance. Every player begins the night with energy. You've waited all week for this game. You buy in, stack your chips, and shuffle with anticipation. You don't sit down to fold, you sit down to play, and that's the first emotional trap, because the truth is, good poker feels slow. The best players fold most of their hands. They sit, they watch, they wait. It doesn't look exciting, But while others chase action, they are building a rhythm, one that protects their mind from tilt and chaos. Beginners struggle with boredom. They want to participate, not observe. They convince themselves that any hand could hit. And for a while that illusion holds. They catch a few flops, win a few small pots, and start to believe they're running good. Then comes the inevitable downswing. A cooler, a bad beat, or a string of missed flops. And suddenly, emotion replaces awareness. Tilt begins before you notice it. Tilt doesn't always look like rage. It can start as subtle impatience, a small voice saying, "I've folded too many times. I deserve a hand." But poker doesn't work that way. The deck doesn't care. If you force the action because you're frustrated, you've already lost the hand before it begins. Emotional control starts with acceptance. You cannot control the cards, you can only control your responses to them. Every time you fold a marginal hand, you're reinforcing discipline, not just mathematically, but mentally. That discipline compounds. Each good fold builds the strength to make another. Over time, your calm becomes habit. You begin to take pride in folding. You start seeing patience not as weakness, but as quiet dominance, the ability to wait while others destroy themselves through restlessness. The ego behind bad starting hands. Poker attracts confidence. Everyone wants to believe they can outplay their opponents, even with inferior cards. And sometimes that confidence becomes ego, a subtle whisper that says, "I can win this pot no matter what I'm holding." That mindset is poison. It turns logic into theatre. It replaces discipline with bravado. Ego-driven players often widen their starting hand ranges after losing a big pot. They feel the need to get it back. So they play hands like King 10 or Ace 8 out of position, hands that look respectable but crumble against stronger ranges. The result is predictable. They chase momentum instead of structure, and in chasing it, they burn both chips and focus. True confidence is quieter. It comes from knowing that folding a strong-looking hand can be the most powerful move at the table. It's the calm realization that not playing is still a form of control. The reset. Returning to center. Every player needs a method for resetting, because no matter how experienced you are, tilt creeps in, through fatigue, frustration, or even success. You lose track of your structure, start calling too much, or bluff in bad spots. When that happens, you need a ritual to return to balance. Some players take a deep breath and count to 5, some stack their chips neatly, using the motion to refocus. Some stand up, stretch, walk to the restroom and wash their hands, literally resetting their senses. The goal is simple: interrupt the emotional spiral before it accelerates. Because once you lose patience, your starting hand discipline vanishes with it. And without that foundation, every decision that follows becomes reactive. The best players in the world don't stay calm because they're immune to emotion. They stay calm because they've built systems to recover from it. Awareness first, reset second, refocus third. The story of the quiet comeback. There's a story told in card rooms everywhere. Different names, same pattern. A player sits down and runs cold for hours. Every decent hand misses. Every continuation bet gets raised. He folds, watching his stack drip away. Eventually frustration wins. He looks down at Jack 10 suited and decides, this one's mine. He raises, gets called, and flops top pair. Relief floods in, finally a winner. But the turn brings a higher jack. The river pairs the board. He pays off a bigger hand and watches his stack collapse. Most players never recover after that. They spiral, playing faster, looser, trying to undo what's been done. But this player does something different. He pushes his chair back, and he takes a breath, stacks his chips, and tells himself quietly, start again. For the next hour, he folds almost everything. He watches, listens, regains rhythm. He returns to structure, tight, calm, patient. And when he finally does pick up pocket kings, the hand almost plays itself. His opponent bluffs into him, he calls down and doubles up, no outburst, no celebration, just balance restored. That's emotional control in its purest form, not avoiding the fall, but finding your footing afterward. The calm advantage. Poker is a game of incomplete information. Every time you act from emotion, you reveal more than you realize. Your breathing changes, your chip handling changes, your timing changes. The calm player watches it all. When you control your emotional state, you control the tempo of the table. You decide when to act, when to wait, when to fold, and that control extends far beyond psychology. It affects your results. Because every rash decision adds variance. Every calm one compounds stability. Strong emotional discipline turns your starting hand structure into something deeper, a reflection of your character. You start to see the game not as chaos, but as a mirror. When you're balanced, your play is balanced. When you're unsettled, your decisions scatter. Poker doesn't lie about who you are, it reveals it, one hand at a time. Strength through stillness. In the end, emotional control isn't just about staying calm, it's about staying aware. You learn to observe your own impulses the way you observe opponents. You see the urge to play junk hands as what it is, a flicker of impatience passing through your mind, not a command to act. Every time you choose discipline over emotion, you strengthen your long-term edge. You reduce tilt, preserve your bankroll, and sharpen your clarity. That's how great players separate from the rest. Not through flashy bluffs, but through quiet restraint. Poker is a game played in noise, but won in silence. And the silence begins the moment you fold a hand you wanted to play, because you knew it wasn't right. Once you've learned to fold more, play selectively, and stay emotionally steady, the game begins to reveal subtler layers. You start noticing patterns that aren't visible to beginners. Timing shifts, betting rhythms, body language, and the quiet math behind each line of play. This is where understanding starting hands evolves from structure into art. At this level, discipline doesn't disappear, it refines. You no longer ask, is this hand playable? You ask, what does this hand represent in the story I'm telling? Because in advanced play, your starting hands are no longer just your cards. They're tools for balance, deception, and range management. Beyond strength, understanding combinations. Every two-card hand is part of a larger pattern of combinations. For example, there are 16 total ways to make ace-king, 12 offsuit, 4 suited. Each version carries slightly different value depending on position and stack size. The suited combinations have backdoor potential, flushes and straights, while the offsuit ones rely more on raw top-pair strength. When you start thinking in combinations rather than isolated hands, you see the game differently. You begin to understand why professionals sometimes play weaker-looking hands aggressively. They're balancing the frequencies of their overall range. If they only raised with obvious premiums, opponents could fold everything else. But when they mix in a few light holdings, like a 9-7 suited or ace-5 suited, they remain unpredictable. Advanced players don't play randomly. They play intentionally varied. Each decision contributes to a range that stays mathematically sound over time. Timing and perception. Another subtlety of advanced starting hand play is timing. You can take the same hand, say king-jack suited, and play it in completely different ways depending on the texture of the table. At a tight, cautious table, a hand like that becomes a weapon. You can raise or even 3-bet with it because opponents will overfold fearing strength. At a loose, reckless table, that same hand becomes a trap. You're better off calling or folding, waiting for a cleaner spot. The cards haven't changed, the situation has. That's the advanced layer, reading the tempo of the table and adjusting your starting hand thresholds to match it. You're not betraying your principles, you're expressing them dynamically. Discipline doesn't mean rigidity, it means awareness. The conversation between hands. At higher levels, starting hands interact like voices in a conversation. What you play now affects what your opponents believe you could play later. Suppose you folded for an hour and suddenly raise from the early position. Everyone at the table assumes strength. If you actually have pocket aces, that assumption helps you. But if you occasionally raise with ace-5 suited or 10-9 suited in that same spot, now your image shifts. When you do pick up aces again, you'll be paid off because your earlier variety made you harder to read. This concept, controlled image manipulation, grows naturally from strong hand discipline. It's not about bluffing for the sake of deception, it's about maintaining an equilibrium between predictability and chaos. If you fold too often, you become invisible. If you play too much, you become transparent. The sweet spot is presence without exposure. Hand example, the subtle balance. Let's walk through a hand that captures this nuance. You're on the button in a deep-stacked cash game. The table has been cautious for several orbits. You've played few hands. Now you look down at 8-6 suited. By the book, this isn't a premium hand, but in context, it's perfect. You raise. Both blinds call. Flop, 10-5-3 rainbow. You have an open-ended straight draw. The small blind checks, big blind bets half the pot. Here, you could call or raise, but think deeper. Your range as the pre-flop aggressor contains many strong hands that connect with this board. Overpairs, top pairs, sets. If you raise, you represent those holdings while also carrying real equity with your draw. You choose to raise, the small blind folds, the big blind calls reluctantly, turn, king of hearts. That's a high card favouring your perceived range. Your opponent checks again. You continue the story, betting 2/3 of the pot. They fold, you take the pot without showdown. What made that hand powerful wasn't luck. It was narrative coherence. You chose a starting hand that could either make a strong hand or convincingly represent one. You played it in a spot where your table image supported the story. That's advanced awareness, using your earlier discipline as the groundwork for flexible aggression. Adaptation versus automation. One of the biggest traps for improving players is over-relying on charts or fixed rules. Those are excellent tools for learning, but they're not meant to be cages. Real poker lives in the grey areas, the times when theory bends under the weight of human behaviour. An advanced player might fold ace-queen from early position in one session and 3-bet it in another. They might open 9-7 suited in one game and throw it away in the next. The difference lies not in the cards but in the read. When you sense that a table is passive, you can widen your opening range to exploit that fear. When it's hyper-aggressive, you tighten back up and let others self-destruct. This dance between adjustment and structure is what turns technical understanding into mastery. The key is intention. Every deviation must serve a purpose. You're not guessing, you're adapting. You bend the structure without breaking it. Pattern recognition and quiet confidence. The more you play, the more you'll recognize repeating patterns. You'll sense when a hand is setting up for a bluff before anyone moves. You'll notice that the same players defend their blinds too loosely, or overvalue top pair. Your starting hand discipline becomes your compass. It keeps you grounded while you explore these intuitive layers. With enough time, you develop what feels like instinct but is really deep memory. You've seen enough flops, turns, and rivers to recognize how stories unfold. You stop calculating and start feeling the math. That quiet confidence shows. Your hands move slower, your eyes stay soft. You're no longer reacting to outcomes, you're guiding them. And it all stems from the foundation of choosing your starting hands with clarity. The advanced paradox. Here's the paradox of mastery. The more advanced you become, the simpler your game looks. You're folding just as often as you did when you started, sometimes more. You're not chasing fireworks, you're controlling rhythm. To outsiders, it appears you're doing less. But beneath the surface, your awareness is sharper, your timing cleaner, your reasoning faster. You understand that power in poker doesn't come from aggression. It comes from precision. You know which hands to play, when to press, and when to vanish into the background. You're not trying to outplay everyone, you're waiting for them to outplay themselves. That's the advanced layer. Not new tricks or flashy moves, but a deeper calm. You begin to realize that true mastery isn't louder, it's quieter. It's knowing that the game doesn't reward those who play the most hands, it rewards those who understand why they play the ones they do. The room was quiet except for the sound of chips sliding across felt. It was late, the kind of late where time starts to blur and the lights above the table feel warmer than they should. Outside, the city was asleep. Inside, 10 players sat beneath that low hum of fluorescent calm, their focus sharpened by silence. You'd been folding for what felt like hours. Jack 10, Queen 8, 9-4, and each one looked like a maybe, but you let them go. One by one, hand after hand, you watched the dealer's rhythm carry on without you. It wasn't boredom, it was meditation. Every fold was a small act of patience, a quiet acknowledgement that not every moment is yours to take. Across the table, a man in a grey hoodie played every pot. He fidgeted, tapped his chips, called any raise that came his way. For a while it seemed to work. He dragged in pots with weak pairs, bluffed into fear, smiled at his own momentum. But then came the slow unravelling, the missed draws, the unlucky turns, the disbelief that followed each loss. You could see it in his posture, the quiet storm of a player who couldn't stop moving. Then it happened. You looked down and saw ace-king suited. For the first time all night, your hands felt weight in them again. Not the weight of excitement, but of readiness. The cards weren't just strong, they fit the rhythm you'd been waiting for. You raised. The man in the hoodie called, his voice louder than the rest. He wanted this one. The flop came king 9-3. Top pair, top kicker. You bet small the way calm players do, he called instantly. The turn brought a 7. You bet again, slower this time, and he leaned back, eyes scanning the ceiling. Then came the raise, sudden, sharp, full of emotion. A shove of the chips that hit the felt like punctuation. The table turned silent. Everyone watched. For a moment you said nothing, you just breathed. He'd been bluffing all night, pushing weak edges, forcing spots. And now, here it was again. The rhythm repeating itself. You called. The river fell, a meaningless card, and he turned over 10-9 offsuit. Second pair, no story, just speed. You showed your hand quietly, no reaction. The pot slid your way, and he exhaled in disbelief, already reaching for more chips he no longer had. He wasn't beaten by bad luck. He was beaten by impatience. You didn't gloat, you didn't celebrate, you simply stacked your chips, one neat column at a time. The table settled again into its gentle hum. Across from you, a new player whispered, "Man, how did you wait that long?" You smiled without looking up, because the answer wasn't about waiting, it was about listening. You'd listen to the rhythm of the game, to your own breath, to the moments that didn't need to be played. You'd folded until the right story appeared, and when it did, it told itself. A few hands later, you folded again. It wasn't fatigue, it was peace. You knew the next rush of cards would come, and with it, the same decision, to play or not. That's the heartbeat of poker, not the wins, not the bluffs, but the spaces between them. The folds that hold your focus steady until the moment arrives when everything aligns, the math, the instinct, the stillness. As the dealer shuffled, the chips whispered across the table like waves returning to shore. You felt no urgency, no hunger, only the calm satisfaction of someone who had learned the oldest truth in poker. You don't need to play every hand to win. You just need to be ready when the right one comes. Poker is best understood through stories, through the small, ordinary hands that reveal something deeper than luck. Each one begins the same way. 2 cards, a decision, and a quiet question. Is this the right time to play? Let's walk through a few moments at the table, different seats, different situations, one lesson running through them all. Scenario 1, the temptation hand. You're in middle position, early in the night. The air around the table feels relaxed. Nobody's getting out of line, but everyone's restless to win something. You look down and see Queen-Jack offsuit. It looks playable. It looks fun. You raise. The player to your left, a tight regular, re-raises. Everyone else folds. Now it's back on you. The pot is small, the temptation is loud. You could call, see a flop, maybe catch something, but stop for a moment. What does this hand really give you? If the flop brings a queen, you'll fear ace-queen. If it brings a jack, you'll fear ace-jack or kings. And if it brings nothing, you'll check-fold. That's not poker, that's chasing. You fold and the dealer moves on. 2 orbits later, you see that same player reveal ace-king at showdown. You would have been crushed, but instead of regret, you feel a quiet pride. That fold wasn't weakness, it was clarity. It was proof that discipline protects you long before luck can hurt you. Scenario 2, the pocket pair dilemma. Later that night, you're under the gun with pocket 4s. It's a pretty pair, clean, symmetrical, one of those hands that tricks you into thinking it deserves to be played. You raise. 2 players call, one on the button, one in the small blind. Flop. King 9-5 rainbow. You miss completely. You check. The button bets. Small blind calls. This is the test every player faces. Can you let go of a hand that looked good a minute ago? Too many players keep betting into strength because they can't accept that their hand has changed value. But that's poker. The story shifts every street. You fold. The hand continues without you. The turn brings another king, the river a 9. The button shows ace-king. The small blind shows 9-8. Your pair of 4s would have been dust. Sometimes folding is like taking the exit ramp when traffic's about to pile up. You don't see the chaos. You just know you avoided it. Scenario 3, the late position edge. You're on the button now. Everyone folds to you. You peel back 8-7 suited. This is where good poker lives, in position with playable cards against unprepared opponents. You raise, and only the big blind calls. Flop Jack 10-2, 2 hearts, you have a flush draw and backdoor straight possibilities. He checks. You check behind. Turn 9 of spades. You just made a straight. Quietly, efficiently. He leads for half the pot you call. River, king. Now there's a possible higher straight out there, but the odds are small. He checks. You check back, controlling variance. He flips over king 10, thinking he's improved. You show the straight and take the pot. That's position in motion. Not wild aggression, but control through patience. The strength of your starting hand wasn't in its value. It was in its potential to play comfortably when you acted last. That's what position turns into: freedom. Scenario 4, the bluff catch. Different table later that week. You're playing a low-stakes tournament. Stacks are shallow. Blinds creeping higher every orbit. You're in the cut-off with ace-queen off suit. A player under the gun raises, 2 folds, and you call. Flop queen 7-3, top pair, top kicker. He bets small. You call, turn 10 of clubs. He bets again, larger this time. The board is dry, no real draws. You sense tension in his motion, the kind that comes from bluffing into fear. You call again. River, 2 of hearts. He moves all in dramatically. The room goes quiet. This is where theory meets instinct. You replay the hand in your head. What value hands does he have? Pocket aces, maybe kings, but those might have re-raised pre-flop. The rest, bluffs, missed airy go, you call. He sighs and shows ace-jack. Just a failed attempt at pressure. You don't celebrate, you breathe. You weren't playing your hand, you were playing the pattern. Your strong starting hand gave you a range advantage, and that allowed you to stay steady when emotion took over across the board. Scenario 5, the trap that teaches. You're deep in a home game, surrounded by laughter and half-empty glasses. It's been a good night, steady, controlled. Then you pick up king-queen suited on the button. A player in early position raises large, almost impatiently. You call. Flop king 9-4, top pair, good kicker. You feel solid. He bets the pot, you call. Turn 3. He bets again, same size, forceful. You hesitate but call once more. River, king, now you've made trips. He shoves all in fast, you snap call. He shows pocket aces. And just like that, a perfect trap closes around you. For a moment you feel the sting, not just of chips lost, but of pride bruised. Then, as the dealer pushes the pot away, you realise something. You didn't misplay the hand, you misread the rhythm. Against that player, that bet sizing, that tone, folding the turn would have been discipline, not fear. The lesson isn't don't lose, it's lose correctly, because every correct loss strengthens your decision-making for the next one. You take a breath, nod, and stack what's left. Next hand, you fold queen 10 and it feels like healing. Scenario 6, the tournament shove. You've made it to the final 30 players of a local event. Blinds are high. Your stack has slipped to 12 big blinds. You look down at ace-5 suited in the hijack. You're not desperate, but you're close. If you fold, the blinds will eat you alive. If you shove, you might get called. You glance around. The players behind you all have medium stacks. They don't want to risk their tournament lives. You shove. Everyone folds. That's the power of timing. Not bravado, not luck, just awareness. You used a marginal hand in the right window. If you'd played it earlier, it would have been reckless. If you'd waited, it would have been too late. Poker's balance lives in that moment, the recognition that sometimes courage is discipline. Scenario 7, the hero fold. A week later, you're playing cash again. You've been steady, calm, reading well, and you pick up pocket jacks on the button. The under-the-gun player raises, another calls, and you 3-bet. Both call, flop queen 9-3, 2 spades. They check to you, you continuation bet small, both call. Turn ace of diamonds. They check again. You are slow down, checking behind. River, 9 of hearts. First player leads for a pot-sized bet. The second folds when it's back on you. What could he have? Pocket queen? Ace queen? Maybe ace 9? Every possibility beats you. Still the temptation whispers. You've invested so much. Maybe he's bluffing. You fold. He shows ace queen, proud of his hand. You nod, smile, and feel that strange calm again. It's not joy, it's self-respect. Every disciplined fold writes a small victory in the invisible ledger of long-term play. Scenario 8, the quiet win. Different night, new table. You've been patient, folding more than most. The player to your right is chatty, impulsive, the kind who needs to prove something every hand. You look down at 10-10 and he raises. You call in position. Flop, 9-6-2. He bets half the pot. You call, turn 4, and he bets bigger now, trying to push you off. You call again, calm, controlled. River, 8. He shoves. You take a breath, replay the action. He's over bluffing. You call. He slams the table and shows ace-5 suited. Nothing. You reveal your pair, stack the chips, and say nothing. The room moves on, but inside you feel something shift. Not excitement, confirmation. You didn't win by luck. You won because you started with structure and ended with courage. Scenario 9. The fold that saved the session. You've been playing for 6 hours. Tired, hungry, up slightly, but fading fast. You pick up ace-10 offsuit in early position and raise. A loose player on the button calls. Flop. Ace-king 9. You bet, he calls. Turn 10. Now you have 2 pair, but the board is dangerous. Any queen makes a straight. You check to control the pot. He bets small, almost inviting. You call. River. Jack, 4-carded straight on the board, and he bets big. You think, if he's bluffing, this is genius. If he's not, you're dead. You fold. He flashes queen-jack and grins. You nod and exhale. That's what survival looks like. Letting go of good hands in bad moments. Scenario 10. The return to stillness. It's midnight. The table's down to 5 players. Stacks are deep, chips whispering like dry leaves. You're on the button with ace-king. You raise, the big blind calls. Flop. King 7-2. You bet, he calls. Turn king. Trips, control, quiet certainty. You check, disguising strength. River. 8. He bets large, almost defiantly. You call, and he shows king 10. You take the pot and glance at your reflection in the polished rail of the table. It's not pride you see, it's composure. Because this finally is what the game gives back, a mirror of how you've played. You've learned when to fold, when to push, when to stay patient. You've learned that understanding starting hands isn't about cards at all. It's about rhythm, restraint, and the courage to stay consistent when emotion tempts you otherwise. You stack your chips slowly. The night hums softly around you. The dealer shuffles, and for a moment, before the next hand begins, you appreciate the stillness, the space between choices where real poker lives. Logic is the map, instinct is the compass, and every strong poker player learns to use both. In the beginning, logic is everything. You study charts, read theory, listen to strategy videos. You learn that certain hands are strong in certain positions, that odds matter, that patience pays. Logic gives you structure. It saves you from chaos. But after thousands of hands, something else begins to stir beneath the surface. A quiet intuition forms. You start to feel when a hand fits, even before the numbers confirm it. That's not superstition. It's experience reshaped as instinct. The balance between mind and gut. Logic builds your foundation. Instinct refines it. One without the other is incomplete. A purely logical player may know the math, but miss the moment. They fold where intuition would have sensed weakness, or call where the model says fold, but the rhythm says otherwise. An instinctive player, on the other hand, might feel everything but prove nothing. They rely on emotion instead of structure. The strongest players don't choose between them. They let the two coexist. Logic keeps them grounded. Instinct tells them when to bend the rules. The example hand. You're sitting in a $2, $5 cash game and you've been there for hours, steady, folding most of the night. You finally pick up ace-queen suited on the button. A player in middle position raises, another calls. You call behind, flop. Queen 8-4, all clubs. You have top pair in the nut flush draw. The first player bets big, the second folds. Your brain starts calculating. You have top pair, strong. You have the draw, stronger. By logic, this is a clear call or even a raise. But something feels off. You've watched this opponent for hours. He never overbets flops unless he's flopped huge. You see the way he places his chips, slower than usual, like he's trying to look natural. You just know this isn't a semi-bluff. It's a made hand, maybe a set or a smaller flush. Logic tells you your equity's fine. Instinct says walk away. You fold. He exhales, shows king 10 of clubs and grins. You had to have the ace, huh? You just smile. That's the perfect balance. Logic told you you could, instinct told you you shouldn't, and both were right, in their own way. Where instinct comes from. Instinct isn't magic, it's recognition. Every hand you play becomes a memory stored somewhere quiet in your mind. The pace of a bet, the tone of a voice, the rhythm of a session, they all add up. Eventually patterns form, and when those patterns repeat, your body knows before your mind does. It's why seasoned players can't always explain why they folded. They just knew. They've seen that exact situation, that same subtle tension, 100 times before. Instinct is logic practiced until it becomes silent. But it only works if your foundation is strong. If you've skipped the discipline stage, if you play impulsively, your instincts will lie to you. They'll confuse desire for wisdom. They'll make you call because you want to, not because you should. Real instinct is earned through thousands of disciplined folds. Every correct decision, even the boring ones, sharpens that inner voice. Over time, it becomes the most reliable signal you have. The harmony. Logic teaches you to ask questions. What's my position? What's my range? What's his likely holding? Instinct teaches you to feel the answers. Something doesn't fit, something feels off. Together, they create harmony. You become less robotic, more fluid. You still follow structure, but you can flow around its edges when the moment calls for it. When you play a hand now, you're not just using math, you're using memory, rhythm, presence. And that presence is where true awareness lives. Because at its highest level, poker isn't about being right, it's about being balanced. You make decisions that make sense and feel right. You fold when others would chase, call when others would fear, and bluff when the table's pulse says it's time. The line between logic and instinct isn't meant to be walked perfectly, it's meant to be listened to. Logic speaks clearly, instinct whispers, and when the two align, the game slows down into something timeless. A simple dance between knowledge and trust. That's the real beauty of understanding starting hands. You begin with rules, you grow into awareness, and somewhere in between you stop asking what the right play is, because you already know. Poker doesn't reward flashes of brilliance, it rewards patterns of discipline. You can play one perfect hand and lose, or fold 10 straight hands and win more in the long run. The game measures not moments, but consistency. And nowhere is that more visible than in how you handle your starting hands over time, because this isn't a skill you master once, it's a habit you build, hand by hand, until it becomes who you are at the table. The daily work of patience. Every session tests your resolve. You'll sit through long stretches of nothing. Bad cards, dead seats, missed flops, and in those stretches the temptation to make something happen will rise like a tide. That's when discipline matters most. Because good poker isn't about finding excitement, it's about creating longevity. Each time you fold a weak hand, you're not wasting an opportunity, you're preserving your focus. You're keeping your stack and your emotions intact for the hands that deserve them. You're proving to yourself that you can outlast frustration. That's the heart of long-term success. Endurance over impulse. When you learn to fold with the same calm you use to bet, the game starts bending in your favor. The power of routine. Great players treat poker like an athlete treats training. They show up prepared. They study, rest, review, and repeat. They don't depend on motivation. They depend on systems. If you want to grow, build rituals around your game. Review your hands after each session. Write down one spot where emotion took over and one where patience saved you. Track not just results, but decisions. Over time, those notes become a mirror. You'll see your leaks, your progress, and your patterns. Discipline isn't static, it's a living process you strengthen every time you sit down. Bankroll and boundaries. The most overlooked form of starting hand discipline happens before the cards are even dealt. Bankroll management. Playing within your limits keeps emotion out of the equation. If the stakes make your heart race before the flop, you're already playing too high. Fear and greed live in the same neighborhood. They both lead to bad decisions. Set boundaries. Decide how much you're willing to lose in a session, and stop when you reach it. Don't chase. Don't reload out of pride. Discipline in money reflects discipline in play. It's all the same muscle. The players who last aren't the ones who win every session. They're the ones who can survive every downswing. Because the only real edge in poker is endurance. The quiet mastery. There comes a moment in every serious player's journey when they realize that the real goal isn't to win big. It's to never lose control. You'll start noticing that your best sessions feel peaceful, not thrilling. You'll leave the table not because you're tired, but because you're done. You'll win small pots that add up quietly and fold big hands that would have broken you before. That's the evolution of discipline, from something you try to hold on to something that simply defines you. It's when folding king-queen feels as natural as betting pocket aces. It's when losing a pot doesn't shake you and winning one doesn't inflate you. Poker stops being a roller coaster and becomes a rhythm, a long, steady march toward clarity. The real reward. Most players think the reward of discipline is money. It's not. It's peace. Peace in knowing that your choices make sense. Peace in trusting that you're growing even when luck runs cold. Peace in sitting through the noise of a session and hearing the quiet logic beneath it. Over years of play, this mindset becomes your edge. You'll notice that the same people chasing every pot are the ones still chasing years later. And you'll still be there, calm, composed, patient, stacking the small wins that others never see. Because that's how mastery works. Slowly, invisibly, hand by hand. You don't force it, you live it. The sound of the cards returns to where it began. A quiet table, a slow shuffle, the small flicker of anticipation as two cards slide your way. You lift the corner of the first, then the second. The same decision waits, the same one that has always waited, to play or to fold, and it's simple, but it's never small, because every choice at the table is a mirror of patience, awareness, emotion, and restraint. And that mirror, over time, reflects the person holding it. Coming full circle. At the start, this lesson seemed technical, how to choose your starting hands, what to play, what to fold. But by now, you know the truth. It's not really about the cards. It's about everything behind them. Every hand you fold builds focus. Every hand you play with purpose builds confidence. Every moment of stillness between them builds clarity. That's the rhythm of poker, the slow alternation between action and restraint, risk and calm, movement and silence. You can study all the math and memorization in the world, but the real game happens in that silence, where decisions become reflections of who you are when no one is watching. Choosing what to play and what to fold isn't just a strategy, it's an act of self-control. It's a way of saying, I decide the tempo, I decide when to engage. That's why strong players look calm even in chaos. They're not fighting the game, they're listening to it. They understand that mastery doesn't come from forcing outcomes, but from aligning with the flow of decisions that make sense over time. What you've learned without realizing it. You've learned that folding isn't failure, it's structure. That patience isn't waiting, it's preparation. The good hands aren't just strong, they're simple, balanced and logical. You've seen how starting hand discipline keeps you calm through the noise. You've learned that emotion is your real opponent, not luck. You've felt how small choices, hand by hand, fold by fold, create a quiet kind of momentum. And maybe most importantly, you've seen that poker, when played with awareness, becomes less about winning pots and more about understanding yourself. Because if you can stay patient here, under pressure, under light, surrounded by noise, you can stay patient anywhere. Poker becomes a mirror for life. You can't control the cards, but you can control your reaction to them. The player you're becoming. Think about how you felt when you first started playing. Maybe you wanted action, wanted to be part of every hand, every pot, every rush of adrenaline. But now something's shifted. You've seen the beauty in restraint. You've felt the calm that comes with folding 10 hands in a row and not caring. You've learned that the excitement fades, but composure lasts. The player you're becoming doesn't chase luck. They invite it through consistency. They don't fear long nights or cold cards. They sit steady, waiting for clarity to return, trusting that it always does. That's how professionals are built. Not from talent or the theory alone, but from repetition with awareness. Every session, every fold, every small decision adds up. You don't get stronger through the big pots you win. You get stronger through the thousands of quiet ones you let go. Beyond the table. If you carry one thing away from this lesson, let it be this. Poker doesn't just teach you how to play cards. It teaches you how to think, how to pause, how to stay steady when everything around you wants you to move faster. That same discipline applies everywhere. At work, in relationships, in moments of uncertainty, you'll notice yourself recognizing patterns before they form, knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to walk away. It's the same skill, just in a different form. The stillness you practice here, the calm between hands, isn't wasted. It becomes part of who you are. You start to carry it with you, like a steady rhythm beneath the noise of daily life. That's what makes poker more than a game. It's a quiet training ground for patience, precision, and presence. The final hand. The night is winding down, the chips are scattered, the cards worn at the edges. The dealer shuffles one last time. You've been through hundreds of decisions tonight, most of them small, some of them big, but all of them yours. The cards slide toward you again. You look down, not with hope, but with awareness. Whatever they are, you'll know what to do. You'll see them through the lens of everything you've learned. Position, context, emotion, and balance. If they're playable, you'll raise with purpose, and if they're not, you'll fold without hesitation. Either way, you'll stay still. Still enough to notice the soft hum of the room, the rhythm of the dealer's hands, the quiet weight of your own calm. Because that's what this journey has been leading to. Not mastery over others, but mastery over yourself. Poker will always be a game of luck in the short term, but discipline turns it into something more, a lifelong practice of clarity. And clarity is what turns cards into lessons, decisions into art, and silence into strength. So as the dealer gathers the deck and the lights dim above the felt, remember, you don't have to play every hand, you just have to know which ones matter. The rest is patience, the rest is presence. The rest is the quiet side of the game, the part that's been waiting for you all along.